You are swiping through a feed engineered for infinite dopamine. Between 15-second dance routines and brightly lit lifestyle vlogs, a heavily worn 19th century Russian novel appears. This chart shows the scale of the #BookTalk hashtag. This community has generated 52 million videos and over 370 billion views. It is a massive digital ecosystem where the most viral content often focuses on intense psychological suffering. The unexpected face of this viral subculture is Fyodor Dostoevsky. Younger readers are navigating a landscape defined by economic instability, ecological dread, and a pervasive sense of an ending. This environment breeds a specific kind of digital nihilism. Dostoevsky is trending because millions of people are using his literature as a survival guide. They are studying a man who survived nearly every form of misery the 19th century world could produce, to find a way through their own crisis of meaning. Fyodor Dostoevsky was born in Moscow in 1821 on the grounds of a military hospital, his early childhood surrounded by the sick, dying, and grieving. When he was 9, a young girl he knew near the hospital was murdered. At 15, his mother died of tuberculosis, removing the emotional center of his household. Shortly after, his father was reportedly killed by his own serfs in a violent uprising. This era also marked the beginning of Dostoevsky's epilepsy, a condition that would shadow him with unpredictable seizures for the rest of his life. Modern internet culture often views deep personal wounds as the primary drivers of identity. Dostoevsky lived that framework, experiencing grief, chronic disease, and the violent death of both parents before he reached adulthood. These traumas functioned as clinical trials for his future work. They provided the raw psychological data he needed to map the exact mechanics of human suffering. In 1849, the state arrested Dostoevsky in St. Petersburg for attending a progressive book club. The Tsarist regime charged him with conspiracy and sentenced him to death. He was led into a frozen square and tied to a post. He stood in a white hood, listening to the drum roll and the sound of rifles being raised. Then, at the last possible second, a rider arrived with a stay of execution. The entire event was a staged psychological tactic. The state used the terror of imminent death to break political prisoners, hoping they would return from the brink as obedient subjects. Facing a firing squad only to realize the ordeal was a piece of state theater is a total confrontation with absolute meaninglessness. It reveals that the structures governing life can be arbitrary and hollow. This manufactured brush with death redefined Dostoevsky's perspective. He spent the rest of his life driven by an obsessive compulsion to actively create meaning where he had found none. His actual punishment was 4 years of hard labor in Siberia. He lived in rotting barracks through summers of suffocating heat and winters of relentless cold, stripped of every luxury except his own thoughts. In this camp, surrounded by these heavy iron shackles, he accepted that suffering was the baseline of human existence. He returned to society and struggled through a decade of gambling addiction and volatile relationships. Stability only arrived when he hired a young stenographer, Anna Snitkina. They married, and she took over the practical chaos of his life, managing his finances and his seizures. With Anna's support, he channeled his cumulative trauma into his final masterwork, the Brothers Karamazov. You can see the intensity of this process in these handwritten notes, a chaotic, layered attempt to turn life into fiction. His life demonstrates that meaning is rarely found. It must be laboriously built from the wreckage of unavoidable pain. This brings the focus back to modern readers. Dostoevsky's pioneering psychological realism resonates today because it mirrors our current hyper-awareness of internal states. Readers encounter his deeply flawed, mentally unstable characters and recognize the internal friction they feel in their own lives. His work skips the shallow comforts of optimism. He writes from a position where pain is guaranteed, focusing instead on how a person chooses to bear it. Dostoevsky provides a blueprint for endurance. By documenting his own survival and projecting it into fiction, he shows that while the world offers no inherent fairness, the act of staying and building is where meaning is actually created.